Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Walkon Podcast of 2025. We're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm not just starting with the post-holiday beard. That's not the main difference. The main difference is we are going to give an update on sort of my journey along this podcast process, and also dive into some of the episodes from the first two seasons. We've completed two at this point. The third season is going to launch in January, and so we thought it would be a great opportunity to share a little bit of insight into what I'm learning. What were some of the highlights from these episodes? This is not a best of. I think the best of episodes are a cheeky way for people to say, hey, we didn't make any new content, so let's go back and have the editors go back in the room and find some old footage and put something together. That's not what this is at all. I went through and took a moment to watch all of the previous two seasons and really had some moments that were striking, that resonated with me. And so I want to share those with you, both my thoughts on them and also the clips, so that you can make your own insights and judgments from them. As a reminder, this podcast, the Walkon Podcast, was started because I was looking for what's next. I'd gotten to a point in my career where, as a public relations consultant, I got a bit burned out, was wondering if I was doing my best work, if this was my highest purpose, and decided that I wanted to explore what could be out there for me. What would be the right thing to do? How would I spend the back half of my career? Maybe it's the back third of my career, as I'm a little older than I maybe like to admit. And so that's what this was. I was reading books, I was watching podcasts, and realized throughout my career, I've been a media spokesperson. I've been in front of cameras. I love talking to people. And I really loved the radio interview format. That was always something that was really powerful for me. And what I realized is podcasts are similar and they provide a great tool. And so I decided I'd start a podcast, and some brave friends and colleagues and strangers jumped on, and we had some really interesting conversations. So that's what today is about. Again, season 3 will drop in January. I've got some exciting guests. If you follow along on our social media platforms, you've seen some Easter eggs of some things to come, but we're hard at work putting those episodes together, and we'll be dropping some in the middle of January. So let's stop there for a second and really begin to reflect. So as I think about these episodes and listen to them and watch them, the first thing that came to mind was none of the big questions that I'm pondering are unique to me. And right? If you go on Amazon or you go to a bookstore or you look at the podcast section, self-help is massive. It's one of the biggest areas. And, finding your purpose, finding your passion is one of those key early topics. What I came to realize, though, is even people who are living what I would assume is their dream job or they're filled with purpose, they've grappled with these questions. What's next? Am I capable? Am I qualified? How do I get there from here, wherever there is, whatever that future looks like? How do I get there? What are the steps I take? What impact does that have on my life if I do those things? So it was heartening to know that I'm not alone, that there are many people, even if I look at them and go, gosh, that job, they get up every day. I am so envious. I love their work. I love their passion that they bring to it. I'm jealous. Well, grass is always greener, right? Because that may be something that they love to do, but they are realizing that they're challenging themselves. They have challenges. And so it was really heartening to come to that realization. The other thing that was clear is at some point, as they were searching, looking, wondering, they all took a leap, and it was rooted in faith in them, faith in an outcome, hope, commitment, but also clarity that they could do this, that the risk was worth it. And in one of the early episodes with my brother, I use a PG version, but as an entrepreneur, I use the metaphor at some point you sort of got to grab your stuff and jump into the river and trust that you can swim or find your footing in that fast moving water. And so they all took a leap, whether it was forced upon them or whether they just decided it was the right moment, they took a leap. The third thing that I really came away with, which again, none of this is rocket science and really isn't surprising to me, but it was a great, healthy reminder, is that it takes hard work to succeed. Yes, there are talented people. Yes, Michael Jordan is a freak of nature who just has these inordinate skills. Nancy Pelosi has these innate ability to connect with people and to understand people. But they each put in these hours. They demonstrated grit, as some people call it, to do what they do, to get where they are. Elon Musk is another example. Like him or not, believe that he's not, the innovator, that he bought companies and he took them to a level. He didn't create these things. That all may be true, but he put in the hard work and the belief that everything will be okay because they are capable, whole, and enough. And this point really resonates and hits home with me as someone who's going through an executive leadership and performance coaching program. And I'll give an update on my journey in a minute. But that really resonates because through this coaching training that I'm participating in, we are told this over and over again, that people are capable and whole. They are enough. In my previous life, before coaching, people would approach me pretty regularly and ask for advice or support or guidance. And I was always happy to give my perspective, always happy to give recommendations, always willing to and love to get out a whiteboard and let's map out a plan for you. Let's put it on paper. Let me help you do that. Let me tell you what to do. And what I've learned through coaching is that if we believe people are whole and capable, then it's not my job to give you answers. Instead, my job is to ask the right questions that unlock new learnings, new pathways, new possibilities for you, choice for you. And you then, as we talked in that last bullet point, take the leap. You make the choice. I can't do that for you, nor can I map a plan for you. I can be a sounding board. I can ask questions. And that is the role of a good coach, of a good mentor, of a good executive leader, of a good boss. And so, I really, really found through these conversations that shone through in those moments, that these were people who knew that they were enough, they were capable, and that they would figure it out and they would get there through hard work. So let me give a quick update, and then I want to dive into some episode highlights for you that really, really bring the first two seasons to life. So what's the update? So again, I've spent nearly 30 years as a public relations, political public relations professional. I've worked for nonprofits. I've worked in the corporate sector. For the last 10 years, I've had my own consulting firm, Laurentide Strategies, and people hire me as an outsourced executive to help them run organizations, optimize organizations, to build communications programs, to engage various stakeholders. I was a media spokesperson for Walmart. So every Black Friday, I would be at a store in Atlanta on CNN, Good Morning America, doing local news, promoting the store. So that's the world I've lived for 30 years, and I continue to do it. I enjoy it. I have some consistent long-term clients that, again, I'm an outsourced executive for. I pick up project work. I'm invigorated and excited about something that I'm working on here in the Finger Lakes for later this year to help drive some thought leadership in the place that I call home up in the Finger Lakes. So none of that changes. What's really changed is I found coaching, and I don't think I've shared this story. I'd been doing research, I'd been doing work, and as I was reading about finding my passion, there were all these books about leadership, and they were sort of this line connecting them. And I began to be aware of coaching, executive leadership coaching. I'd seen a stress therapist before, so that was like coaching, but I'd not participated in a coaching program, and I'd had mentors, so really wasn't sure what it was. Then randomly at a holiday party last year, I had just been elected to city council, and a new colleague of mine was asking me for my perspective on grit, and he was taking notes, and we had this conversation, and I realized he was in a coaching program. And he said, "Hey, why aren't you a coach?" And it was really just this like instant light went off. And I was like, why am I not a coach? I give advice. I have sound thoughts. I have experience in a range of nonprofits and the world's largest corporation. And I've owned my own business. Wow, I could provide perspective. And then it hit me though. I have no idea what coaching means. I have no idea what that entails. So I began to research it and read a lot of different books, read a lot of different authors, watched a lot of podcasts, and then began to look at programs and was choosing between a couple programs and ultimately chose Brown University. They've got a great ACT program. It's their leadership program. It is certified under the International Coaching Federation, which is the gold standard. And so when you finish this program, you're on the pathway to sit for the exam for that certification. And I am almost done. I'm actively coaching as part of that. I'm sort of in what you would call a residency phase, but I'm actively coaching clients. I absolutely love it. It is hard work. It is challenging work, but gosh, I love my clients. I love the conversations we have. I love unlocking opportunity for them. I love unlocking new ways of thinking for them. And so I will, all things going to plan, graduate in the middle of March and fully hang out my shingle. And I am going to announce a new brand at some point in Q1. My existing consulting company will continue because I believe communications and coaching go hand in hand. The approach I take is people hiring me as outsourced executive goes hand in hand with people hiring me to be their executive coach. So I'm going to launch a new brand in Q1 that will be a communications and coaching platform. And I'm super excited. I can't wait to get started. So that's a bit of an update on me. More to come in the interim. If you want to stay up to date, www.michaelmills.info is my website. And it's got information about me, my city council work, my consulting work. So it's a great place. The podcast is on there. It's a one-stop shop for all things I'm working on. So let's dive into the episodes. And this is going to be a bit of an interesting thing for me. We're going to try and play some video clips. I'm going to talk a little bit. We'll play the clip and we'll talk a little bit about it. So we'll see how that goes. But hopefully you'll get my perspective on it. And then you'll hear the clip that we associated with it. So let's start with season 1, episode 1. I brought on my brother, James Mills. Easy guest. He was easy to get. I owed him a favor, or he owed me a favor or two. So it was an easy get. Kidding. He's a really accomplished salesperson. And so I brought him on. And one of the things we really talked about, which I'd been struggling about for a little bit, was, do you have to be passionate about the work you do to be good at it? Or can you find passion in work you're good at, but it's not what you necessarily sign up to be doing? And we have a discussion in there about a famous Prof G podcast episode where they talk about telling people to do work you love and that will make you rich. Don't do things that you love, or do things you're good at because that will make you rich, and don't do things you love because that won't. If you aren't passionate about it, I don't think you can be the best version of yourself. You can put in the 10,000 hours. You can grind. You can be a grinder. I mean, I think as there are, I'm an example. I played a college sport and I was short for my sport and I wasn't the most gifted person in the world, but I maximized where I got because I had a bigger heart than anyone and I was willing to work harder than anyone. So talk to me about that. That was a long bit I threw at you there, but talk to me about that. What wins out? Is it passion? Is it your, following the things you're good at? What is that equation for you?
Honestly, I think it's a combination of the two, right? So, if I follow what I'm good at, it's sales. Obviously, I have a pretty impressive track record. But I think you need to be passionate about what you're selling, if that makes sense. There was a period where I had an opportunity to work at 1099 for a medical marijuana company. And for some reason, I just couldn't get passionate about it. And the results showed. And I left. I couldn't do something I wasn't super passionate about. I think it's very commendable and I think it's very noble, but it just wasn't something that made me get up every day and say, I want to do this, right?
Yep.
Pharmaceuticals did. Were there times when I had products that weren't maybe the best in class or weren't going to be world changers? Of course. But when I did really well, it was the drugs that I believed in and those things that I truly, truly thought would help people. And that's kind of what led me to real estate, because everyone needs someplace to live, right? And so being able to find people the place that's their dream really gets me up every morning, gets me excited.
So here's my take on this, and you've seen the clip. I think you have to love your work to be productive, to feel fulfilled. You can be good at work, but not be fulfilled. And so I am a believer that riches come to you when you do what you love, whether that's financial riches, whether that's the riches of in my case, coaching and helping clients or consulting on a communications perspective. I am enriched by doing work that provides value. So let's go to the next big clip here, which is season 1, episode 2. We had my friend Craig Allen Eck on. Craig is a talented musician, now a talented professional in the production space, particularly with music tours. Craig had a couple things that really stood out for me. In this world, which now it feels like it's a post-corporate DEI world, but in the early 2020s, there was this reckoning and discussion of equity and inclusion. And one of the big topics, which really gained a lot of traction, was if I don't see myself represented on a stage or on a screen, how do I know what's possible? And so here's a clip with Craig talking about how seeing things come to life for him changed his life.
One thing too, kind of touching on the John Mayer thing, like I actually knew John a little bit back in Atlanta, back in 98. I went to high school with a guy named Clay Cook, they were in a band called Lo-Fi Masters together. And honestly, I kind of blame John for like sort of my drive a little bit, because we were all hanging out and, hearing them kind of work on songs, and then then seeing that song on VH1 and stuff, it was like, whoa, it made it tangible. It made it so possible and tangible that it was like somebody I, connect with and hang out with is now achieved like the next tier, where it always seemed to be like this mysterious, I think when we're young and we're music fans, we go to concerts, we just think that distance between the stage and the crowd is so far. And when you have someone kind of break that, you're like, whoa, like we can do that. Like that's possible. So I
go
blame
from
him a lot.
fantasies to dreams, right? They go from fantasies to dreams.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh, like this is obtainable. And that was eye-opening. And that was what really fueled a lot of my drive.
And so what that really means for me is dreams are dreams. Dreams are all about possibility. But it is when you see somebody else doing that it's not just ether. It's not just a conceit that's possible. It says, hey, if that person can do it, I am capable, I am whole, I can do that too, and here's how I would do it. It may not look the same. It may not feel the same. The results may vary, but it is possible. And man, I'm going to go for it because I'm just not out there. One of the things I'll share why this really resonates for me is my dad was a dreamer. He was a teacher, a coach. He worked at Kodak for a while on an assembly line. He was really kind of artistic, and he would go and he would make arts and crafts, and he bought table saws, and he would build yard art, and he would go to these, occasionally he took a chance and would go to these, arts and crafts fairs, and he just never really did well. And he had these dreams that for him were not rooted in a sense of wholeness and capableness. And a result, he would just fold it and move on to something else. And so for me, why this really resonates is dreams are fragile. And I'm getting a little emotional. Dreams are fragile. Seeing someone else do something similar builds confidence. And sometimes it is just that crack in a dam. It is that little bit of confidence that can empower you to say, this is not crazy. I'm going to take that leap, right? Going back to one of the themes from earlier in the episode. So thanks for that, Craig. It was a great insight and really hit home with me. One of the things I talk about regularly, we're going to play a clip here, is building your toolbox. And Craig says it really well about how you make opportunities real and about experience. Yeah. And I also know, Sam's not your only gig, right? When you have these downtimes, it looks like you also play different roles. Like you were a tour manager this past year for another act. What is that like? Does that allow you to stretch and learn some new muscles and new muscle memory?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got this quote that if someone said it, then someone let me know so I can give them credit. But like, you can't train experience. And one of my things is like, I've done so much when it comes to music. It's like being a tour manager for a club tour doesn't really scare me that much. I did it as a drummer. You know what I mean? I've been in a lot of those same rooms as a drummer. I've been in there maybe even as a guitar tech. So it just, whatever experience or whatever knowledge I have that I can implement and I feel confident enough that I can like take on those roles. I mean, I'm probably not going to be a production manager anytime soon. That is a pretty heavily weighted, position. But a tour manager for a small, van tour, club kind of tour, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. There's a lot of, I've done merchandise. I've done merch. That's, I've got a bit of a retail background, and then, again, being able to like engage with people and stuff like that. It's all just part of it. It's all just all the little lessons and stuff, and then me just being like, yeah, I can fulfill that. That seems pretty easy.
Yeah. I love you can't train experience. I often, as I talk to younger professionals, whatever the industry, I always use sort of two things. One is, just put your head down and do the work. And when you pick your head up again and see how far you've come and how far you've grown, right? That's that doing the work and getting the experience. And the other is you're always building a toolbox, right? So you've been on the road. You're like, well, I know what happens, when we lose the trailer or, the merch situation. You've dealt with it. You've managed it. And so now when you can do that for someone else, it's just you've got the toolbox. So I love that. He said it really well. And one of the things I tell young professionals all the time, and this really resonated with me, is every task that comes in front of you is an opportunity to build a tool or to hone a tool, to build an experience that you're going to put in your toolbox to use for future opportunities, and it's going to provide future success. I do that all the time. Obviously, you have to learn, you have to stay current. I'm learning new tools with podcasting, but I'm calling upon old schools. This is me sitting across a studio in the middle of rural Georgia, in the middle of Orlando, Florida, talking to a radio personality. That's all this is. I'm calling on skills that I've honed in the past. And so one of the things I find really important, and again, I would stress to any professional, particularly people earlier in their career, is don't just check a box. Hey, my boss gave me a task to do, check. How does it impact the project you're working on? How does it impact your future success? How can you hone this tool, take this tool off the shelf, put it in your box so that you can come back to it at a later time? I think it's incredibly important, and Craig had a great saying for really bringing it to life. One more from Craig.
That was another thing. There's a whole nother aspect to, I guess, my life and career, and that is like, I networked like crazy. I was constantly going to local shows in Atlanta, making friends. I used to go to Eddie's Attic on Mondays when they would do the open mic nights, and I'd wait for an artist to be like, that would move me a little bit or enough to be like, hey, we should start a band together. I was that guy. I was like scrappy dude, just like probably super annoying, but it lent to like all these great friendships. And then as the people that held on longer, you're like, hey, you still play drums? Like that kind of thing. And I mean, that's, I think, a huge part of it. Don't be annoying, but be present and be around. And the more you can kind of understand the scope of it all, I never tried to like insert my opinion too much. I just tried to listen a lot and just make people laugh and just sort of like be a good hang. And honestly, that carries over even to now, where like, it doesn't matter how good of a tech you are, the hang factor is massive on the road.
This hit home for me because I will tell you, I am bad at this. A big part of success is showing up. As Hamilton, as they say in the Hamilton movie or musical, being in the room where it happened. If you're not there, Did it happen? It didn't happen with you. That's for sure. And I want to give an example. And this is something that I fight myself on every day. And I've got literally tasks this week to be in the room, to show up, to be there when it happens. I worked for a candidate running for Georgia Labor Commissioner. I was in grad school, young guy, 22 years old, busy with grad school, busy with a social life. I was bartending and waiting tables, quote unquote, busy. And so I would go in and punch a clock. I would go in and I would do my work and I would bust my butt. I was doing, PR work for this candidate, not a really terribly defined role, which is always often the case in political campaigns. And so I would go in and it would be time, the end of the day, I'd be getting ready to go to the class or, just want to go home. And there would be the candidate with the campaign manager, who was like 24, by the way. And they'd be laughing hysterically. And I'd, sort of either sheepishly go in or quickly go in so I could just say hi, goodbye, and get out. And that's where the conversations happened, where the campaign knowledge was exchanged, where decisions were made on what was next, where promotions were decided, where relationships were built. And, this guy who's my peer, who's now a campaign manager because that's what he'd done for several campaigns, was just show up, said, hey, man, if you want to have any success in this industry, you've got to start showing up. And I was like, offended. What do you mean? I'm there every day. I'm busting my ass. Don't tell me to show up. No, I wasn't showing up. I was showing up for the job, but I wasn't showing up to be part of the group, to be part of the team. And it is so important. So thanks, Craig, for bringing that forward. Again, it is something that as a 30-year professional, I literally wrote to-do list items right now for the start of the new year because I am committed to being in the room where decisions are made, where relationships are built. And one of the interesting things, by the way, it doesn't mean you have to do extra work. Sometimes it's just showing up. A committee meeting, a happy hour, talk to someone new, listen, learn, let people know that you're interested by just being there. It is incredibly powerful, and I can't stress it enough. All right, let's go to season 2, episode 6. My friend and colleague in my program at Brown, Cheryl DeCruz Young, a dynamic, incredible professional in the consulting world and just someone I really admire. She's also a Liverpool football fan, so kudos to that. But Cheryl is really intelligent, insightful, a supportive colleague. I trust her. She's been amazing to go through this coaching program with. And one of the things we talk about is the reactive mindset. And we're gonna play that clip for you now. It feels like one of the drags, we've made this, as you talked about going forward and back, one of the drags is this reactive mindset of the pie is finite. And so if you're giving a seat at the table to someone else, you're removing me from that table, or my share of the pie gets smaller. And I think that is an understandable reaction. Look, I'm a 50-year-old white man that, 10 years ago, if I applied for jobs, I'd get interviews 75% of the time if I was qualified. Now I get 2%, right? It's just, and I understand it and I get those dynamics, but I think you do have this sense of the world is changing. I can't keep up. I don't understand it. I'm being left behind. I'm having taken away from. And I think that is a reactive mindset that is natural in some degree, but it is a big drag on progress. And I'm curious if you agree or not, and what you think we can do to kind of overcome that.
I think it is a scarcity mindset. And I think you coined it really well. It is because people are in that reactive state. So I think we all have to help. And I don't want to get political as well. I think, but that's also informative at this current point in time.
Yep.
So that also leads to optimism in terms of progress and where we are.
Yes.
And I think both sides would probably say that theirs is not the scarcity mindset, right? I think genuinely they would both say it. But how do we together drive change and together achieve? I would go to some fundamentals. And they are, we need everybody in the workplace because we have a declining birth rate globally.
Yes.
And it's the first time in the US that we're reaching some pretty important demographic changes. Then, so we need everybody. I would say if we just take it to North America, from a competitive perspective, it's vital that we need everybody in the working age to support the growth and the competitiveness of the USA. And if we look back, and this was why, my husband and I, he's an entrepreneur. He has thrived and flourished here. And the reason is because of the entrepreneurial mindset that we've always had in the USA.
Yes.
And the immigrant flow that have then supported the changes. So I think, again, it's an optimist view, but I do think if we intentionally work on policies that don't disenfranchise certain groups, really listen. So part of our coaching is to listen at the level 3, right?
Yes.
Politicians have to do that. We mustn't disenfranchise any group. We've got to listen because everybody's needs are really important, equally important.
Yeah.
But we are operating in a multicultural society more than ever. And so the structure needs to evolve.
So I think that's really insightful. And I want to use the current state of American politics to make this point further. But more than that, it's about building relationships and work in the community. We do, again, feel like there is a large part of our society that feels like America is a finite pie. And if you get something, whether you're an immigrant coming to this country, whether you are a colleague who got a promotion, whether you got an extra day off, it is a slight. It is a scruff on my nose. You got something that I didn't. It is a reactive mindset. It is this sense of there's not enough to go around, instead of seeing what is the opportunity in America. And as a result of that, one of the things I think we're all a little sensitive, we're all a little scruffy and scratchy. And so we're not willing to listen. We're not willing to give space and grace. And so we automatically come to conversations, whether it's at work, social media, politics, from this defensiveness. My fists are up. You're going to tell me something and it's going to mean I'm wrong. Let's try this year and take a step back and really listen and walk into that conversation going, this person brings something to that conversation. This person has something to offer me that I don't know what it is, and I'm going to listen and learn. I'm not going to dismiss them. And I will share, as you probably know, I'm a Democratic elected official. This is one of my big calls for Democrats this year who got their teeth kicked in nationally in the election. It is a disservice and a continued jeopardy to dismiss people who do not go to Ivy League schools, who do not work in, a law firm. Maybe they work in a farm. Maybe they work at Walmart. Maybe they live in the Finger Lakes, New York. Maybe they live in Nebraska. They're Americans like us. They bring so much to the table. We all bring something to the table. We all have something to learn from each other. And so dismissing people because they're in flyover country or they don't bring electoral votes like California or New York is a detriment to people. It is a detriment to America. And it is a recipe for continued disaster for the Democratic Party. So I'll get off my soapbox a little bit. And this podcast isn't about politics, but it's a bit free-ranging. That's what happens when you give me a microphone and a camera and the ability to talk about whatever I want. But in all seriousness, I'm committed this year to listening more and really digging in and trying to understand people and where they come from and what makes them happy, what scares them. Because I'm going to tell you more often than not, what scares them, what scares each other, what makes people happy is the same. I was reminded, I just took over the holidays. It's a long story that I will not bore you with, even though I have all the time in the world with a podcast. But in 36-hour window, my toddler son and I drove 18 hours round trip to see my mom. We drove down to Virginia. And so we went from New York to Virginia, and we drove through Maryland and West Virginia and, Virginia, Pennsylvania. And there is amazing homogeneity among what you experience. The gas stations are the same. The jobs are the same. People are the same. I marveled at the differences. I marveled at how stunning. I live in a great place. The Finger Lakes, New York is a stunning place. But man, Virginia, you are a special, gorgeous countryside. And so there is uniqueness everywhere, which is what makes us special. But I believe as Americans, no matter how big this country is, hundreds of millions of people, from coast to coast, north to south, it is incredibly diverse, but we are all the same. We all want the same thing. And I'm committed to listening more and not judging as much and trying to find commonality so that we can all move forward together. All right, let's do one more. So, season 2, episode 3, Whitney Marshall, also an executive leadership coach, a dear friend. I respect her immensely. We worked a lot together as corporate philanthropy types. And we're going to play a clip here where she talks about being downsized and what that meant. I don't know if you haven't been let go before, there are many different terms for that now. I've been in that position as well. It is deeply personal, and shame is a powerful word, but that's true, right? It is this sense of what did I do wrong and why me and how could you? And you go through the stages of grief, right? And it really is, it's hard to see what's next when you're in that sort of pit of despair and sadness and anger and loneliness. But I know you dug out and you turned. And so, but I just wanted to stop for a second and particularly for folks who are listening to acknowledge them if they've been in that position before, because you're not alone.
Yes.
Really talented people this happens to all the time.
Yes, thank you for echoing that, because I
Yeah.
think that it's something that we don't talk enough about, quite frankly. And what I really wanted to do, and quite frankly, what I did for months, was hide. I just needed to cocoon. And my job for 20 years had been being out in the community. There was this blurred line between my identity and then the firm, my role at the firm. And in any sort of community relations role, as you know, because you've done it your whole career too, your identity sometimes starts to bleed in and people see you and kind of think, oh, there's such and such company. And so I really needed to hide to heal. And I realized that I wasn't able to show up if I didn't take the pause.
Yeah.
And it wasn't initially intentional. It was just what felt right.
Cope and
A way
recover.
to cope. Yeah, a way to cope. All my emotions were right here. And I knew if I saw, which for people who are not able to see me, right at the surface is really what I should be saying.
Yes.
And that was hard. And, also recognition that I needed to deal with my own stuff. That wasn't anybody else's responsibility. But I also realized I had been on for a very, very long time and had not been still enough to consider what I needed for a very, very long time. And so when you've been operating at that place of burnout for many, many years, more than, 10, if I was being honest about 60 to 80-hour work weeks for more than a decade, it'll catch up to you. Pausing was a really great gift, but it felt very scary at the time to accept it. And I very much felt I had failed. And it was very, very hard to sort of figure out what was next.
So I've been fired once. It was, I think I could say it was a mutual decision. It wasn't a good fit, but I've been fired. And I will tell you, it is like a death in the family. There's stages of grief. There's anger. There's disbelief. There's fear. There's loathing. And Whitney's story is a really powerful one. And I think what I just want to echo is that everything you feel in that moment is natural and understandable, but it's how you respond and think about what's next that is the defining part of that experience. Do not be defined by that as an end point. And it's terrible. I'm thinking of this, I'm saying this, I'm thinking of the movie, what was it? Up in the Air, or, whatever the George Clooney movie is where he goes around firing people, and Anna Kendrick. It isn't a finality, actually, unless you make it that way. And so this year, we are all going to face hardship. We are all going to face things that feel like the end of the world. How you respond is what matters. And Whitney answered a few questions that were transformative for her. She found the space to ask questions, to be inquisitive, to look at what was really important, to go back to values and let those drive what she was going to do next. And I admire her for that. And I hope that for all of you. And the way I would bring it full closure or full circle here into a final statement is my son is 4, just turned 4. He's learning to ice skate. I played college hockey, so it means the world to me that he's even interested. But he has these moments of doubt. Even though he's getting kind of good and figuring it out, he has these moments of doubt. And he'll say he doesn't want to go to practice on Saturday. And you ask him why, and he says, because I might fall down. And the response I always give, and again, I don't know what's going on with this podcast. I'm getting a little emotional again. But the question I always ask is, and what happens if you fall down? And in his little voice and with his little optimism, he says, we get up. So this year, we are all going to get knocked down. We're all going to get what may feel like the end of the world. My hope for you and for me is that we dust ourselves off, we take stock, we find that quiet space to listen to our values, to listen to that big you inside and say, where do I go from here? And be bold and take those steps. There's a lot more we could do, but I think really that brings it back to the beginning. And it's the lessons I've learned this year that I really want for each of you. Again, you're not alone. All the things you're going through, other people are experiencing, even the ones that we admire who we think they have it all. They all took a leap that was rooted and grounded in faith and hope and opportunity. They were willing to do the hard work, be resourceful, be resilient. And they all did it based on what was true to them and their values. And so that's what I'm going to try and do this year. That's what I hope you'll do when those moments come up. And if I can be a resource through this podcast, don't hesitate to reach out. If I can be a resource as a coach, don't hesitate to reach out. I answer all of my emails and DMs personally. I am not a big podcast that's got a team and army, although I do have some really great people that are helping me out. I want to thank Patrick Greer, who's been doing our editing. He's really the production partner on this. And my new partner, Lindsay Driggers, who's helping to get my podcast out on social media. So with that, as always, this is the Walkon Podcast. This is about people living with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on, and we will see you in 2025.